Hello, my name is Justin Bright, and welcome to Kerbal Space Program version 1.7.3, Next Small Step, where we're working on a Realism Overhaul Realistic Progression 1 playthrough. Alright, so we just got done launching our first couple of sounding rockets, and we launched a science plane, which was a lot of fun. Get a little bit of exciting near the end there when we ran out of fuel. But yeah, so now we're going to move on and let's see what is up next as I jump into the mission control. Alright, so as we jump in, let's take a look at what we have next. And one thing that I wanted to look at was the X-Planes contract, because it was so easy to do that SciPlane that I think that we can actually do this. Like, I think this is doable with the SciPlane that we have, so I think we are going to grab this contract also. Yep, so let's just grab that, and that'll give us some free money that pays back our science plane advancements. One of the next crude things we need to do is break the sound barrier, but that's something we do not yet have the technology for. Alright, so now into the research and development. So we can actually kind of reconfigure a little bit of our science. We're ready to go with the early material science, which has the Tank 2, as I talked about in the previous episode. The Tank 2 is going to give us some of the most important upgrades to our capability, because it reduces the amount of dry mass that every tank has for us going forward. So let's actually drop some of the extraneous nodes that I had put in there in between before I had enough science to do this, so that we have a clear path to our early materials science. Alright, so one other thing I want to just chat about is there is a crash configuration. This is the simulations thing, and there is on the RP-1 wiki, there is a list, there's a configuration file that you can actually grab that tells you what their suggested settings are for this, and this is me tabbing out and looking for that as we speak, and then going in and adding it, and then realizing all of a sudden that I actually have this set up on the left hand side already from the last time I did this. But the TLDR on that is it makes your simulations just about free. Like, it costs a little bit of money but not a lot, and that's really quite a good thing, because you'll be testing a lot. Ideally, you'll be testing a lot anyways, and making it expensive is not actually helpful or conducive to that. So yeah, there we go. And so that's all saved up, so we are ready to get moving forward. All right, looks like next up is going to be our makeup WAC Corporal for the part where we screwed up the why did that stop? That was weird. Where we screwed up the contract, basically, by having the wrong vessel on the pad. So we're just going to get that knocked out real quick. I'll probably just show you just a moment of that, and then we will move right on. Alright, so here we are one more time with the WAC Corporal. So we've got, once again, the kick stage that gets it up off of the launch tower in real life, and then the WAC Corporal Aerobee, whatever you want to call it, sustainer engine that is going to hopefully take it up over the Karman line finally. 3, 2, 1, launch and kick. There it goes. Alright, and that right there is victory. We are up to 136 kilometer apoapsis, which means this is in fact going to complete the contract. So we can just warp up. And there we have it. Contract complete. Karman line. Congratulations, you have reached space. So while I'm up here, the Karman line is actually officially noted as the edge of space, not because of, like, there's a hard line between Earth's atmosphere and space like you'd see in Kerbal Space Program, but because that is the altitude at which wings would have to be carrying you at orbital velocity to maintain any amount of lift. So it's a gradient from how fast a plane with a certain wingspan could carry you at lower altitudes, and that speed is relatively low when there's lots of thick air, but there's so little up here that you would have to be going at orbital velocity anyways for a plane to carry you up here. And so I think that is what the Karman line denotes. So that is the official edge of space, and we have reached it, and we are there. So let's move right along. All right, with the Karman line quest complete, contract complete, whatever, that unlocks a couple more that we can start working on. So there are 2 important missions for us to work on, and the one that we already have a vessel for, this is the WAC is coming up to finish this contract, and that is reach a suborbital trajectory and return uncrewed. And so hopefully that is going to be able to do that. It even says right here, like, although it is not a requirement to launch a biological capsule for this mission, it is a perfect opportunity to do so. So there you go. That tells us that that is exactly how, gives you that idea of how it was done in real life. Talks about the Aero-B that was sent by the US folks in 1951, and how an R-1 was used, which by the Russians. And spoiler alert, we might be dealing a little bit with that later on, but we'll get to that a little later. So yeah, up to 140 kilometers and return, and that is what we have coming up very, very soon, so we'll go ahead and accept that. The other contract of note is downrange milestone. So this is a very important and very challenging contract that I was stuck on for a really long time in my previous playthrough. It took me a very long time to get through this, but there are notes on how you might get after it in here and how you can track it and improve over time. And it also, this is the big one, so this is the big contract. We're not going to accept that yet because it also gives us new sounding rocket contracts for downrange distance launch vehicle development. So in these, you can actually throw a payload on top of your launch vehicle that you're trying to do downrange distance on to give it a to give you some payout while you're trying to do that. So this is what that guide that I was using is trying to avoid, really, because you can be stuck here in the sounding rocket phase doing these contracts and also these altitude sounding rocket contracts. You can basically do one of these at a time, and they give you a little bit less than 10,000 all told, but that's well more than enough than we actually need. But it would cost us a lot of time, and getting to the orbital phase of gameplay is much more rewarding in terms of what I find to be fun, and also in terms of raw funds. So the 10,000 at a time that we'd be grinding out here is not actually worth it in the long run. But we may do a couple of these downrange distance contracts as I figure out how to do it once again, because even in my most recent playthrough where I was testing the series out, I was having trouble with it. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so I think it's time to be a little bold, and oh, look at that, I actually had an upgrade point that I didn't realize that I had earned. You get an upgrade point for every 20,000 funds you spend, for Kerbal construction time, pardon me. But you also get 1 point for every 20 science that you earn. So collecting a huge amount of science is actually incredibly useful, not just for the obvious of like spending it on unlocks, but it also allows you to get more upgrades to upgrade your space center. So I'm going to use, I have 43,000 funds, and we have 1 rocket building in progress that should hopefully get us another contract for another 24,000 funds. So I think we're going to be bold, and I'm going to buy 1-2 points, which gives us 3. So I'm going to put we're going to put 1 in the VAB, and we're going to put 1-2 in our research and development, because we really want to get this moving a little bit faster. So that gets us the post-war rocketry testing in 51 days. Which will be just after the WAC launches, which will be pretty much just in time for us to start development of our next vehicle, because we do not want to try, well, you could, of course, once again, people on the RP-1 Discord have solved this problem because they are brilliant, but in terms of like a very nice clean progression, I am going to wait for the next node of technology before I even start worrying about my downrange rocket testing. So In the meantime, we have another thing to work on, and it looks like the atmospheric SciPlane is also ready to roll again. So let's see. Do I have people with the training? I'm pretty sure I sent people on their courses. Dimitri, do you have mission training? Yes, indeed you do. So I think it's time for you to go get me some additional science. Let's clear this out. We'll just send Dimitri on his own. Well, everybody could use a friend. How about Rostislav? How about you two head out on this mission for me and get us some science? Oh dear, where's Rostislav? Does he not actually fit inside here? Is he inside one of these tanks? Is he gone forever? I hope he hasn't been vanished or anything. Goodness gracious. Well, anyways, here we are on the launch pad. So 3, 2, 1, launch on this. Launch on this. Activate engine. It didn't actually refuel it, huh? Okay. I mean, sure, fine. I'm not sure I understand this mechanic. That's my fault. So let's go ahead and recover, I suppose. Okay, that was very silly, but we got a little bit of science for recovering a vessel, I guess, so that's nice. And looks like Rostislav and Dimitri neither of them disappeared, so we do have both of our folks back, which is lovely. Yeah, so maybe I don't understand how this works. There must be a way to refuel, so I guess we'll figure that out, you know, tomorrow. Oh, okay, we're heading off, I guess. Wow. Okay, yeah, so what I had to do was I just clicked on edit once the recovery finished, and that allowed me to... Oh, gosh, it's so heavy. Okay, I think I may have filled this up a little more, but... Anyways, so yeah, click edit, and then you go through, and it brings you into the spaceplane hangar just like you would for a normal KCT edit, and that allows you to... refuel all the tanks manually, just kind of doing your thing with that. So yeah, that's all you had to do, and I refilled all the tanks, and I'm now not 100% sure that in the original version of this that I was using, if all the tanks were 100% full, like I did. I'm guessing that's not the case, because this is a little bit feels a little bit heavier than the last time I flew it, but it still seems to be working pretty darn well. It's flying just fine for the most part. So hopefully this will not fall directly out of the sky and we will go find some science. But yeah, I'm not sure you guys need to be bored with me just kind of staring at this for, you know, the next 10 or 20 minutes. So I'll see you if I find something interesting. Alright, so having done a little bit of flying around, I've determined that there's not really a whole lot out there to see, at least in range of the Kennedy Space Center. But I was able to finish up the X-Planes Low contract here, maintaining between 3,375 meters and 4,375 meters with a crewed aircraft. So hopefully this time I'm actually going to have enough fuel to make it home. I'm doing pretty well. I have another 15 minutes of flight and I can't see Kennedy Space Center at all, so that's going just fantastic so far. Oh, and I'm also going the wrong way, which is pretty cool, so we may end up having to make a bit of an early landing. And we're actually just going to follow this radio line, which, you know, I think is actually pretty close to reality, right? Following this radio signal back to base. Oh, what is happening right now? I do not enjoy what's happening to my orbit trajectory line. Alright, so it doesn't actually help if you are flying in completely the opposite direction. I am just going to go straight down and try to get out of this cloud. Alright, I have once again managed to run myself out of fuel, but I did finally find the Space Center, so I guess we're just going to see if I can land there once again. Yeah, looks like I just don't have the altitude. I probably should have climbed back up to as high as I could before my fuel ran out, and then use that speed to glide down. But anyways, not to belabor this anymore, let's just go ahead and get this touched down so we don't have to worry about this anymore. I can see the runway from here, but that, for all the good that does us. Turn on SAS, and we are coming in. The terrain out here is thankfully fairly flat. So, ooh, not totally flat though. We saw a little bit of a bump there, and I nudged off the ground. And a little nudge again. And just push down into it, and we are slowing down. Please don't flip. Easy now. There we go. We had a little bit of a wobble, but it looks like we are going to land perfectly safely. Fantastic. All right, so let's put this plane away and stop messing around with airplanes for a bit and move back to rockets. All right, so small update on our technology progress. I have spent a few more of our science points that we have collected with our airplane shenanigans, and we're dipping down a bit into the avionics and science portion of the tree. So we've got early tracking systems, early science, and avionics prototypes unlocked, or not unlocked, but on the way to unlocking. And that's going to get us procedural avionics, which is going to be how we are making guided boosters in the future, because it's not all, you know, spin stabilization and point it straight up and hope that everything works out. At some point in the near future, we are going to indeed be making proper guided first stages and so forth. Once we are not so constrained by money and time. So the avionics prototypes moves us into better and more interesting probe core modules, including Sputnik analogs and some other like things like battery packs and another procedural upgrade. Early science just gets us an ion mass spectrometer, which is a lovely thing that we can do up in space, and it even says right on here that this was something done on aerobie sounding rockets and returned to Earth for study frequently. So that's something that we can do and look forward to in the future. So as you can see, we've got just a ton of science kind of backlogged, and this is why I wanted to get the labs going as fast as possible, and also why our next bunch of points is going to be all research and development, because we need this number to be much, much higher so that we can start cranking through the tree so that we're not stuck in sounding rocket land forever and ever. We definitely want to get out and start doing orbital rocketry, because that's where things start to get more interesting. But in any case, we still have 42 days until our WAC rocket is finished so that we can do our suborbital return mission, which is right here. Reach a suborbital trajectory and return uncrewed. Hopefully this rocket will do that. If not, we'll have to iterate on that design a little bit. And then after that, we will be jumping into post-rocketry testing, which means we get to go into another design phase. But first, let's move on to getting this rolled out on the pad. All right, here we are on the pad with our WAC rocket, and to remind you of what this lovely thing is, we have the Tiny Tim booster here on the bottom. We have our standard WAC Corporal sustainer stage on top of that with the 300mm design, and then up above that we have the 380mm slight redesign of that same WAC Corporal sustainer, but this time with the parachute and biological sample. So without further ado, I don't think we need aircraft pilot anymore, but 3, 2, 1, launch and boost off of that. There we go. So we are up and away. So I can talk a little bit about how Ferrum Aerospace, which is the aerodynamics mod that RP-1 uses, is a tremendous amount more realistic than the model that is used in actual Kerbal Space Program. So it actually has to take into account like the cross section of your craft, the length of your the length and shape of your nose cones, anything that is exposed. All of that is a real factor that you have to design for, and so this at 380mm is going to be slightly heavier and slightly less aerodynamic just because it's a little wider. I think that's the case. Before we get too distracted, 3, 2, 1, stage. And we have lit the engine once again. Fantastic. So anyways, I'm fairly certain that this is slightly less aerodynamic simply by the fact that it's a little bit wider. I'm sure there's a lot of math that you could do to find out exactly how much different they are, but in testing, I've found that the 300mm version of this sustainer works better because, like I said, weight, which is probably the biggest factor, and then probably a little bit of aerodynamics as well. Yeah, so that's the one reason you might not want to go immediately to the 380 millimeter version of this rocket and actually use the 300 millimeter version, which is what I've done, just because I like to show the progression and I like things to be. Let's grab this biological sample from the upper atmosphere. I don't like to have a prescriptive design that comes exactly from like, okay, this is exactly what was launched at this date, and so that's what we're going to do. I don't love that as much as I love making things that I think will work that are kind of similar, but seem to be like what they're guiding me towards. Like there was that 300 millimeter telemetry ring, so we made a 300 millimeter rocket. These science experiments are 380 millimeters, so we're using those. So yeah, no reason not to go ahead and decouple this now that we are just about out of the atmosphere. We are above the Karman line and heading up to 180 kilometers, which means that we have done it. Which is fantastic. That means that we are well on our way to nailing this contract, hopefully, assuming we don't burn up and explode on re-entry. And so here we are. We have reached the actual space, and you can tell because the lovely music, atmospheric music has started, or non-atmospheric music, I should say. And we have new science reports to do that we can get sending back. And you'll notice that the values on those are getting to be pretty high. So that was 2.3 and like 1.5, 2.3, 1.5, 0 because it already got sent, probably another 2.3. So yeah, so we're getting good amounts of science. We are making good progress. And like I said, this is how your science labs will start to get totally backlogged as you are bottlenecked on money. But that's a lovely shot here. And as we see the booster sustainer stage fall away and our science experiments reach up to our apoapsis. All right, now we are getting down to about 76 kilometers, and you can see that the atmosphere is actually starting to dig in and take hold, because you can see our sustainer stage is now flying past us as it has more drag. I think that's what that means, because we are kind of capsule shaped right now, heading straight down, and that is flying up at because it's flying upwards, that means that we are actually flying faster is what that means. So yeah, we are heading down, and I am going to go ahead and arm this parachute. Go ahead and turn off the aerodynamic forces overlay. We don't need that anymore. Unfortunately, that button is still the same as the screenshot button. All right, and that looks like that was pretty darn successful. So let's go ahead and time warp down a little bit further. It looks like we've arrested our velocity pretty well. It didn't flip out. It stayed oriented with the parachute straight down for the entire way. And then now that the parachute is deployed, there we have it. We have our little... Oop, exploded somewhere nearby. The booster just hit the ground. But yeah, so now the thing is pointed straight down like a little plumb bob, and there we go. So that's going to be our first mission. Hopefully this shouldn't explode. There should be no more danger at this point. And here we are. Fabulous. Poik! And then thunk. And there we go. Hopefully this doesn't roll forever, and there we go. All right, cool. So there we go. So that's our TIM WAC WAC all wrapped up. And we can see now that, okay, vessel complete, sure. That got us uncrewed speed record, 1,500 meters per second, 140 kilometer uncrewed altitude, 160 kilometer altitude, and 180 kilometers. And then this is our big contract with a suborbital trajectory and return. So that unlocks the next step. All right, and so we actually get 8 science. 8 science for returning a suborbital flight, and 5 science for the biological sample that we took. And so there's still a little bit more science to be had from that exact mission profile. I think we'll get a little bit more science for doing another suborbital return. We'll definitely get another sample from space low if we wanted to do that, unless we wanted to save that for another mission, because we'll be doing a lot of these this jaunt fairly frequently. But yeah, that gives us 20 science. So let's take a look. Yep, we have 1 upgrade available and 40 grand, so let's go ahead and just spend that immediately right off. And then let's just pump it all into science, because like I said, this is where our bottleneck is right now. That brings us down to just 5 days until post-war rocketry testing is complete, and that's fantastic. That's kind of what we wanted. We wanted those to coincide as much as possible. And then our next 1-point node, I think, is going to take 90 days, which is not terrible, but still not great. So we still have a lot of room to grow on that. All right, so that's going to do it for us this time. Next time I'm going to be taking a look at building the next generation of Aero B rockets using the new engines and so forth that we've unlocked, and we're going to go into just getting down that tech tree. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for coming with me on this journey as I experiment with RP-1. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.